Hi, welcome to Allison and Tom Take on the Universe. Today we're going to talk about kids with abilities. So Tom, when you look into a chart, an astrological chart for a person, can you see whether or not they have abilities? And how is that for children with abilities? But also, have you ever looked at a chart for someone that thinks they have abilities and didn't see any abilities?
Well, I guess the greatest example to that question in terms of just people in general, when I look at a chart, do I see someone with psychic abilities or mediumship abilities? And the answer is yes, and it would be you, because that was the most prominent one I've ever seen. And it was interesting because when Allison came to me for a reading, Medium was on for about a year. I was aware of it, but I wasn't really watching it yet. And so, you know, the name was familiar and I didn't know why. And then I studied the chart. Now, when I study a chart, I kind of become the person in their energy when I'm doing it. So all of a sudden in that moment, I realized who you were and what you were doing. And so the signatures were so strong. And then, you know, there was, and then I laughed because I said to you, why are you coming to see me for a reading? And you said,
because I always read everybody else. Nobody ever reads me.
Right. And so I took it on, and the rest is history in terms of our connection. So in that moment, there were two vital things that were very valuable in terms of seeing signatures in someone's chart with abilities. And that is the planet Pluto and the planet Neptune. Okay, so I'm going to kind of break those down for you guys because Pluto represents the sign Scorpio and the 8th house in the chart. And this is what we refer to as the unconscious, or subconscious part of our connections to what we're experiencing and what's kind of buried and hidden. This is our desires. And our desires is like, we only have two essentially, and that is to take who we are in our energy and to create or destroy. And it's interesting how the reformer and the destroyer are basically the same energy. And so if someone's got a very strong dark energy, you'll see destructive paths, which you'll see in Scorpio in that sign, which is, you know, drugs and alcohol and suicides and these types of things. And then also you'll see in very creative people quite the opposite. They're more constructive in building in their life. And so Allison had strong signatures in that 8th house of being able to read people's energy in terms of how they were subconsciously in their nature. The other thing is the 12th house, and the planet Pluto is in her 12th house. And in that dynamic is we're looking at the unconscious, because, you know, the 12th house is the sort of permeable unconscious part of our nature, because it's the end of everything and where we just start letting go of this world, and then we are moving into another dimension itself. And it isn't the physical world because, you know, Neptune is water, and so water has no form. And so that's kind of the energy of that house. So someone who comes in with Pluto in the house of Neptune and the 12th house is someone who feels in this lifetime cribbed, cabined, and confined.
That's pretty accurate.
Yes, because we're coming to the end. And so we've been spending all these lifetimes getting to the point where we're developing our identities and our egos and how we socialize it. And then we come to the very end of the chart, and it's where we're kind of ready to let go. And if there's been a lot of, you know, damage and things that have happened in the course of getting there, and someone feels trapped in whatever it is they're doing for whatever reason, this is where someone suffers the most. You see, and they suffered in a past life, you'll see it, I'll see it in the chart, or someone who's past suffering and they're here to serve who they are, there's no ego involved. And so in Allison's situation, she comes in the reluctant medium because she has this connection to this other side. The unconscious and subconscious are tied together actually very beautifully because it's a strong signature and it's a favorable one. So here she is investigating like a Scorpio would when she's going into law, and investigates and gets into the subconscious and unconscious of the criminals and the victims. And this is how that all came about.
It's so nice to know there's a reason
Yes.
that I had to walk that path.
Yeah.
I kept going back to why am I continually dealing with death and doing dark things, even as a little girl, dealing with the news and watching the Atlanta child murders and what was going on in our world. it's so interesting to see the little me that was exactly like me, but just smaller, and to look back and be like, there was a reason.
Yes.
It's okay. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
So can you look at somebody's chart? A lot of people will come to us that feel like they have abilities, but maybe there's no signature in their chart. Some people come from a place of ego, like you had spoken of before. But when it's children, I find that's not the case. With children, it stems from two things. One, either they have abilities, their parents don't know how to deal with them, is another part of that. Or I've seen children who talk about very dark things, which even children with abilities can go that way, which I'll go into when I get to the next phase of our interview. But also I see kids whose parents work in 911 operators or are police officers or firefighters. They're hearing the stories and repeating them. So you have to watch what your child's hearing before you give it back to someone like us and say, I think my child has abilities, because there's certain signatures you can look for in their actions as well.
Yes. Well, the other thing I'll say, if you're looking at a child who may have abilities, or even you yourself, and the levels of their powers, if you will, is essentially, it also rules the artistic sensibilities of our nature. So usually someone who's very artistic has the same nature as someone who has the ability to be very psychic. I won't say mediumship as much, because that really is going to be ruled by Pluto and Scorpio, but it is the Neptune quality, or what we call Pisces. And they are the most artistic. And so, because their world isn't the concrete, the world is the imagination, the world is the abstract, and that's how painters paint, and singers sing, and dancers dance. They come from this vision and feeling of what we call more the right brain than the left brain. And a lot of times those people are the ones, and you'll find yourselves who are watching this, you'll sit there and go, oh, I love reading about tarot and numerology and astrology and all these things. And you'll find yourself, you probably have some artistic abilities that you're working on. But again, it's like anything else. Have you been developing it? Because, I did a recent reading, and the issue of this wonderful woman in Dublin, Ireland, was that her past life was about taking care of everybody else, which is to serve, and that's women's roles anyway, but that's all. She never got to be what she wanted to be. And I said, the other part of this life for you is that you're an artist soul. I saw nothing but singing and dancing. And she just, oh my God, that's what I wanted to do, because in school I was in drama, and I had teachers and other people encouraging me to take the lead roles, and I wouldn't, and I had music teachers try to mentor me, and then I wouldn't, because I didn't let myself go there. And I said, well, she just turned 40, and I said, well, you can still do this.
Right, you're still here.
It's still here. So it's just a dormant muscle, a dormant desire that's just buried because of fear. Because the fear is like, what if I make a mistake? What will people think? I don't know myself in this world. And this is where risk comes in. This is where belief and trust in your own desires, subconscious desires. This is something you want to do. Whether you don't know how great it is until you flex that muscle. And so the more you do, the stronger it gets. And I would say the same thing for people with psychic abilities.
I would say the same thing with people with psychic abilities too. I do want to make a distinction, because there's people that I see more as the ethereal, where they psychically, meaning you predict future events, you pull people's energy, what their intentions are to you. Mediumship's talking to the dead, just to be clear. That's the big difference. Psychic's more of an intuition, and mediumship is directly speaking to the other side. I do find that when people say, how do you find a good psychic medium? They can have abilities, but they need to be grounded. It's a different field when you're going to do it professionally. And just because you have abilities, you can use those in your everyday life in any other profession, but doesn't mean they have to do it professionally themselves. So I'm sure there'd be some signatures that you would look for somebody to be grounded.
Yes.
To be able to take that kind of trauma.
Yeah, if there's too much Pisces, they're all over the place.
Right.
And that's the other thing. You'll pick up, oh, I want to do numerology, tarot, astrology. You have to find a form that suits you. You have to find one area where you concentrate on, like anything else. It's like if you want to go into finance, what part of finance are you going into, and focus on that. The other thing I want to say is that when you're looking at, say, a psychic, I'm not a psychic. I will never call myself that. Most people think astrologers are psychics. Maybe some are, maybe they aren't. But in my world, my gift is intuition, very strong, very high vibration of intuition and empathy. And that makes me an artist soul. So I have a lot of artist talents and abilities. But the same thing, mine is I sort of seek the truth, the spiritual truth and answers to people that I can feel and see in their story. And so I don't talk to people's head, I talk to their souls. And that way I'm sort of telling them what you do desire because you're not in touch with it and I can find it. And that's my favorite part of my work. But intuition is knowing without knowing how you know. All I do is create a consciousness to that part of your own self.
Well put. And I'd say that in this day and age, which is different than when I was a little girl, you know, we've had shows like Medium and spirituality. People seem to be more open to than religion these days. There's been a huge shift in belief systems. And so now is the perfect time that if you have children, and I raised my own children this way, to be open to the other side. And I've created 10 tips for parents with children with abilities on how to parent a child that's gifted. So when I was a child, you know, 100 years ago, when I was a child, the topic of mediumship and psychics was more in witch land.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
It was a Halloween topic.
Yes.
It was more taboo and cliche. It was just not taken seriously. So when I told adults, my mom, about seeing dead people, I got shut down. And back then, I think especially, and any time before that, we were taught to kind of keep our mouth shut, and I did. But then with our own children, having been a child with abilities, I was able to raise them understanding what they were going through. It was a very unique experience, and it is a genetic trait, abilities. So if your grandmother had it, or you know, grandma knew when people were gonna die, or Aunt Edie could read people and sum them up and say, you're not gonna be here in 6 weeks, and they weren't. Aunt Edie would be interesting, but you have to look at those people in your family and say, that's genetic, I could carry that trait too, and you'll see it grow. For me,
it's better than addiction, by the way. That's a genetic trait you don't want. But anyway.
Yeah, you don't want that one. But it starts in childhood, very young, and usually around 2 when they can communicate. But you'll see babies laughing and kicking when nothing's there, and especially parents that have cameras now that can watch their children from another room on a monitor. To have that unique experience of being able to see them react to something that can't be seen by the eye, but can be seen by the baby. And so I bring people through often that say that they're making their granddaughter laugh, that they're spending time with them. Then when they hit 2, 2.5, and they start to talk, that's when we saw our daughter Aurora telling us there was a man in her room, which scared Joe and I to no end. So Joe had a baseball bat and was going through her nursery trying to figure out where the man was. And she described what he looked like, and it was Joe's dad, who had died a couple of years prior, and she was seeing him in her room. So then I knew that she could do what I do as a medium. And I waited on each child to see if they had it or not, because it didn't matter to me one way or another. I just wanted to be there for them. Fallon could locate objects. She would, especially with food. If I was hiding
She's
candy,
a Taurus,
oh my God. If I was hiding candy for Halloween up high, she was up there finding it. So she had a sixth sense of suckers. She was very good at finding the sugar. And then Sophia, I didn't know she had it until she was 3. And she was always a happy baby toddler and so sweet. But when she was 3, my dad died. And I was just kind of catatonic, sitting at the table, still trying to process it. I was only 30 at the time, didn't know how to lose somebody that close to me. There's no great manual on how to get through it. There's just living through it. She came up to me and she pulled me down to her and went like this, and I leaned down and she said, "Grandpa said to stop crying on the inside." And because I was trying to keep it inside. And it just, I knew then that she could talk to him and see him. And she wasn't afraid. And here's what I don't think people understand about children that makes them such better people than we are. They don't even know that that's unusual, that they're talking to somebody that might
Yes.
be a little see-through, or that they hear in their ear, because they hear and see them like they hear and see us. So to them, they're just conveying a message. It's important not to shut them down and to ask them if there's anything else Grandpa would like to say, or, just hug them and make them comfortable with their abilities. But that's what I knew Sophia did. So we raised all 3 of our girls. Easter egg hunts at our house weren't like other people's houses. That egg might be in our neighbor's yard over the fence, or in a gumball machine.
Well, I'll say Sophia, out of the 3 girls, Sophia is the strongest to me in terms of looking at her chart, because she's the sun in Cancer, which is a water sign, and her moon's in Pisces, which is a water sign, and those are very strong water energies for her. So her sensitivity, people that have strong water in their charts are really more the empaths. They're the ones that receive information. They're not looking for it, it just comes to them. And even for myself, my sun sign in Libra is in the house of Cancer, and I have a Cancer rising. So I'm and then Neptune is in my house of Cancer. So I'm highly receptive, which is why I go out in the world and feel before I see anything. And that's why we call the abstract and the conceptual dynamics of artists. And that's how I just breathe. I've always been that way. But even in the world of looking at someone who says has psychic abilities or these mediumship abilities, is that they're shut down, is because it's taboo, okay? But you're an artist, it's not taboo. But even for me as a male baby boomer, I was not encouraged to be an artist in the things I naturally was, okay? So, but again, I will say this, as an astrologer, I never get a lot of referrals. People have great readings, but then they're afraid to tell anybody they went to an astrologer.
I get that.
Yes,
I get some people that are like, oh, that recording of the reading you're going to send me, there's only 1 copy, right? It's like, yeah, I don't need your recording, so don't worry about that. That's all you. So it's still a little taboo, but I find people much more open than they were 15 years ago.
Generationally, you'll see a difference in the generations.
Well, and the awareness, even the older generations, there's an awareness with boomers that it's something that they can define now, and it's okay, and they don't have to fit into a stereotype. They can just be what they are, as far as an intuitive. And our personalities really weigh into what kind of a psychic, medium, or astrologer you're going to get. And I always say, I want to read people that I vibe with and they vibe with me. And usually I get the sarcastic people, or the deceased chose me to be the one to read their living loved one, and sets up a series of motions to bring them to me. And it'll be because the deceased is a sarcastic 20-year-old guy that thought I was funny, or just could vibe with me in that way, or is more comfortable with women. So we're chosen as well.
I agree.
By the other side, and by the universe for the people that we read. And if we feel like they're not somebody that we can help, we try and direct them in a way that they can get to a resource they need to get the help that they need as well. Thank you for joining us today for Allison and Tom Take on the Universe.